Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess let's get started. So hello everyone, and welcome to the first day of our community action teams, better known to you guys all as CAT 911's Rapid Response Training. And before we begin, I want to thank everyone who's helped create this training and everybody helping today. We have ASL workers, we have different interpreters and facilitators and people in safe break rooms that will be helping. Thank you guys and girls and everybody. So throughout the next few hours, we will be presenting 3 trainings that will cover crisis intervention, suicide, self-harm, and PTSD, flashbacks, anxiety. We will be taking breaks and practicing some self-care in between presentations as well. And additionally, I just want to let everybody know that today's trainings will be recorded. No faces, breakout sessions, or chat messages will be recorded. But if anyone has any further concerns with this, please DM Fernando. I hope he's the only Fernando here today. And let us know in the chat if there's any issues with that. Your name spaces will not be recorded. Don't worry. So CAT 911, a little Fernando. Okay. So CAT 911's rapid response sector is.
Can I interrupt you?
We need to do the language first.
Oh, sorry.
We need to direct people because anyone who only accessed Spanish wasn't able to access all of those beautiful things that you just said. So I'm gonna try to do a little brief. Entonces, hola, bienvenidos a todos a el entrenamiento de respuesta rápida. Los temas que vamos a cubrir hoy son intervención durante la crisis, suicidio y autodaño, PTSD, flashbacks y ansiedad. Entonces vamos a hacer una pequeña introducción para poder dirigir a las personas a donde tengan que llegar en términos de sus preferencias de idioma. Entonces, hola, bienvenidos a todos. Mi nombre es Alexia y estoy aquí con mi compañera Katia. Estamos por parte de Antena Los Ángeles, que es un colectivo dedicado a promover la justicia del lenguaje. Seremos sus intérpretes al español y al inglés el día de hoy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alexia. I'm here with my colleague, compañera Katia. We are part of a collective called Antena Los Ángeles that's dedicated to promoting language justice, and we will be your interpreters today.
La justicia del lenguaje incluye el compromiso de la presencia plena de todos y la capacidad de comunicarnos en nuestros idiomas. Quisiera comenzar reconociendo todos los idiomas presentes aquí y también honrar más que nada a los idiomas de los pueblos indígenas de las tierras en las que estemos. Katy y yo estamos en Los Ángeles, la cual es tierra tongva no cedida, donde el pueblo e idioma tongva siguen existiendo en resistencia.
Language justice includes in the commitment to everyone's full presence and capacity to communicate in our languages. And I want to begin by acknowledging all the languages here today, as well as the languages of the indigenous people of this land. Katya and I are in Los Angeles on unceded Tongva territory, where the Tongva people and language continue in resistance.
Muted. El entrenamiento del día de hoy se va a llevar a cabo de forma multilingüe en inglés, en español y en el idioma norteamericano de señas. Se van a usar el idioma inglés por su mayor parte, entonces si usted no se siente cómodo comunicándose, va a poder elegir un canal para su idioma en unos pocos minutos cuando les indiquemos.
Today's training will be held in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and ASL. And the majority of the training will be facilitated in English. If you do not feel comfortable accessing both languages, you'll choose a language channel in just a few minutes after we've explained how interpreting will work.
Entonces, vamos a estar usando la función de interpretación de Zoom. Después de que terminemos con esta explicación, se va a activar. Entonces, si usted se está conectando a través de una computadora, va a haber un icono de un mundito en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Si se está conectando a través de su tableta o teléfono inteligente, puede pulsar o darle clic donde dice más o more. Va a poder ver un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas y ahí puede seleccionar ya sea inglés o español.
after we're done with this explanation, so we'll be using the Zoom interpreting function, and after we're done with this explanation, it will be activated. So if you're joining us from a computer, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. And if you're joining us using your tablet or smartphone, just click on more and you will see a menu that will include an option called language interpretation.
Ok, entonces para las personas que se están uniendo y quieren accesar al español, les vamos a pedir que pongan un número 1 al principio de su nombre para poder dirigirles a sus grupos pequeños donde sea correcto.
For those of you who are present and prefer to access the content in Spanish, we ask you to please put a number 1 next to your name. So we're aware of this preference, and we'll be able to direct you to the right small groups during small group work.
Ok, entonces si usted no puede ver el mundito o la opción de interpretación de idiomas y la necesita, por favor póngase en contacto con Maggie, quien va a ser la coordinadora de logística para poder ayudarle.
If for some reason you're not able to see the little globe or the language interpretation menu, please get in touch using the chat with Maggie, the logistics coordinator, who will be able to help you.
Y nada más queremos darle una súper mención que se me olvidó a nuestras compañeras intérpretes de ASL, quienes son Tricia y MJ.
And we also wanted to give a big shout out to our ASL interpreters who are Tricia and MJ.
Ok, entonces ahora vamos a continuar a probar que funcione todo. Entonces, si Maggie, por favor, si puedes agregar primero a Katia únicamente y yo me voy a quedar todavía siendo no intérprete y después te indicamos cuándo puedas activarnos a las dos, pero por lo pronto nada más Katia tiene que ser activada, por favor.
So now we are going to try out the interpreting feature. So Maggie, if you could.
To hear, oh. Okay, we're having some tech.
I think.
Yeah, I'm back. We're trying to turn this on.
Wait.
Sorry, I think I started the interpretation too soon. Do I want to put it back on?
Yeah, so what we have to do right now, Maggie, so we can test it out, is just add Katia, and then I'm going to stay here, and then you'll add me later. But right now, let's just add Katia, and then it's going to be another 3-minute thing while we test it out. Okay, cool. So now you should be able to hear me in English, and then if you go to the little globe at the bottom, there is the Spanish channel. So if folks can go and click there and just say yes in the chat if you can hear Katia speaking Spanish, basically saying the same thing that I'm saying right now. Just say yes, or let's do a little, yeah, perfecto. Ok, entonces ahora me deben de escuchar a mí en español y deben escuchar a Katia en el canal de inglés. También si dicen sí, me pueden decir un yes, un sí, un hola, algo en la cajita del chat, nada más para, ok, excelente. Ok, entonces nada más un par de cosas. Si usted es bilingüe, se puede quedar en el plano principal, no pasa nada, todo va a ser en inglés, pero si prefiere accesar el español, entonces seleccione el canal de español y ahí se queda. Todas las personas que prefieren participar en un solo idioma deberían de estar ya en el canal. Usted puede darle clic a donde dice silenciar el audio original para escuchar solamente al intérprete. Algunas personas de repente sienten que es medio causa distracciones el estar escuchando las dos voces. Entonces, si nada más prefieren escuchar a la persona interpretando, pueden hacer eso. Es responsabilidad de todos asegurarnos que podamos comunicarnos usando diferentes idiomas. Entonces, para ayudarnos, les pedimos que por favor hablen fuerte y claramente cuando comparten. Por favor, silencien su micrófono cuando no estén hablando para poder escucharles. Hablen a un ritmo moderado, hagan pausas con frecuencia, especialmente si van a cambiar de un idioma a otro, porque tenemos que andar brincando. Tomen un respiro entre ideas, hablantes o idiomas. Por favor, la persona que esté hablando esté al pendiente de comunicación de los intérpretes y facilitadores en caso de que tengamos que pedirle que haga una pausa o hablar más despacio. Por último, las personas que están escuchando o accesando en español habrán notado que estamos usando la terminación E en lugar de la tradicional A u O para sustantivos con género. Por ejemplo, cuando dijimos bienvenides al inicio, ese no es un error de pronunciación, es un esfuerzo súper intencional de crear espacios inclusivos, evitar hacer asunciones o presunciones con relación al género y obviamente disrumpir con el binario de género, no es parte de nuestra práctica. Muchísimas gracias a Cat 911 por hacer posible que estemos aquí apoyando su espacio multilingüe. Nos da muchísimo gusto ya que sentimos una fuerte solidaridad con el trabajo que hacen. Entonces, ahora sí ya le voy a pedir a Maggie que me active a mí también como intérprete y podemos empezar. Muchísimas gracias.
So thank you everybody for that. Hope everybody is where they need to be. And I guess I'll repeat about today's trainings being recorded. No faces, breakout sessions, or chat messages will be recorded. If anyone has any further concerns with this, please DM Fernando or let us know in the chat. Okay, so moving on, we'll start off with, well, Cat 911's rapid response sector is based across Southern California, and the trainings that will be presented this month were put together by people of varying backgrounds and experiences with first response, mental health crisis, PTSD, etc. We don't see ourselves as experts, but as facilitators of a shared space that honors the collective knowledge and experience that everyone has brought to the table. This organized work is being presented from an abolitionist framework, which will be talked more upon during the presentations that you'll see today and throughout the month. And it's based on transformative justice, which aims to change the conditions that enables harm and violence to occur in the first place. We want to cut it from the source. So we hope putting on these workshops encourages.
Cindy, they're asking you to speak slower.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So we hope putting on these workshops encourages all our attendees to share their own knowledge. And together, hopefully we can build, start building safety and alternative networks for ourselves. Additionally, we are making today's curriculum open to all with the idea that we can all have the ability to intervene in crisis. So feel free to share your ideas throughout the session. And if anybody would like more information about Cat 911, its abolitionist framework, or how to further get involved, please feel free to reach out through email or the website here at cat911team@gmail.com or cat911.org. So let's start. As we present the crisis intervention presentation, you might want to have something to quickly take notes for some of the exercises that we will be doing, and double check that your microphones are working for even further participations in these breakout rooms and role play exercises. And otherwise, mics off, please. So again, I'm Cindy, she, her, and today we'll be starting with the crisis intervention. Our agenda, as you can see, is going to be pretty much an introduction, some grounding exercise, a check-in, the crisis intervention exercise and resources. Andy was sharing some basic principles, abolitionist principles, and we'll be doing small group role play with Ezra and just going through our closing. So if everybody can, since we're going to be doing so much, let's start off with a breathing exercise. So many of the subjects being covered today can be triggering. So if anyone needs to distress or decompress about anything, anytime during today's trainings, we'll be having a safe Zoom room, separate Zoom room, where you can privately talk to CAT 911 responders that will be available throughout the training. Right now, I believe it's Danny. To access this breakout room, send a private DM to Maggie, who will add you to the stack. So we'll start off with the breathing exercise. So if everybody can just follow us with, we'll do a 4-4-4, breathe in, hold, breathe out in 3 sessions. So we'll put a hand over our chest, a hand on our tummy, our belly, and we'll do a quick inhale on count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody hold it 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And release in 4. And let's do 2 more of those. Shake it off again. And we'll be kicking it off with an exercise. So we'll be breaking up into small groups in which I ask everyone to quickly write down, if you can, some answers and discuss among each other the following questions. What brings you to this training? Are there any fears or anxieties you have about doing crisis intervention? How can you tell if you are being triggered? And what will you do for yourselves if you are being triggered? The breakout sessions will be approximately 15 minutes, so please be aware of the time and you'll be brought back when the time starts.
Situate this work within a bit of an abolitionist framework. So abolition is not primarily a negative project, right? It's not primarily about you can never call 911 and carry everything down tomorrow. It's primarily a positive project. It's about how do we create systems of care and different ways of relating to each other such that we wouldn't even think to call the police, or they would just be completely irrelevant, right?
Stop to say that ESL isn't spotlighted.
Oh, we will pause 1 second to spotlight. Hold on. Cindy, can you spotlight the ASL? Oh, Cindy just saw. Okay. Ezra, can you spotlight the ASL?
Oh, sorry, not spotlight, but they said they can't see it while the screen is shared. I think that's what they meant in the chat.
Is there another way to do the screen? Because it should spotlight still.
And you can click on the top right-hand corner on view and switch it to side by side, whoever's having issues, and then it'll show you the ASL and the speaker along with the slides. That's helpful.
Is that good? Should we proceed? Does that solve the problem?
It looks like it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so in any case, back to our abolition story. When we think about kind of intervening, then this isn't about kind of a shame-inducing situation where if you found yourself in a situation you couldn't think of anything else to do, the only thing you could think to do is call 911. This now means you are a horrible person and you've sold out. No, the issue would be well, why were there no other options for you at the moment? And then it becomes our collective problem to think about what could be those options and start to create them. So also within that spirit, in terms of intersecting this with a disability justice perspective, that we also have to understand carcerality broader than just the police, right? There are many ways people can be subjected to carceral systems other than the police, such as, say, for psychiatric care or other systems that deny people's autonomy. In addition, from a disability justice analysis, there's a tendency to exceptionalize crises, right? Only a few people have crises, and they need unique people who are experts to cure them, usually by taking them out of the community. But when we live under conditions of settler colonialist, white supremacist, heteropatriarchal shenanigans, crises are just going to be typical, right? Because we're living in crises. We all have mental health care and need support. So an abolitionist future requires us to kind of deprofessionalize mental health and see it as something we can all support and be part of. I'm not saying that there's no room for people with more intensive training, but nevertheless, our goal is to, in a certain way, spread this knowledge so that we all start to see that we can actually support people in crisis, and that we may be ourselves the people that will be in crisis. So there could be much more that could be said about this, but I did want to put some few resources if you're interested in more. So there's Abolition and Disability Justice. I think it's .com, yes. So that website has a whole slew of helpful resources, and also has a good statement on how to do abolition from a disability justice framework. There's also a great video. Shout out to the Fire Week Collective. I think some people are here today, so go check them out. But Elliot Fukui did a great video on how to think about building systems of care that are not institutionalized when we think about disability justice. And also from a SoCal perspective, there's CRIP Justice that works on police violence against people with disabilities. And then if you go to the abolition and disabilityjustice.com, you'll see even more resources. Okay, so what I'm going to do is do a little bit of an exercise before we get started. Let me, nope. How do I stop the share? Wait, hold on. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of an exercise here. And so the question is, let's say you're having a problem. Doesn't have to be major drama, but it could be. You're having a problem, and you're talking to somebody, talking to a friend, supporter, or whatever. What are things you like to hear, or what are the things you like the person to do, and what are things that you don't like? So I'm going to kind of grab everyone's thoughts. Just feel free to randomly yell out or put them on the chat, or if you don't want it associated with you, just DM it to Fernando, and Fernando will yell out. What are things that you like? And Fernando, if you can say things, because I can't really see the chat too.
Absolutely, I'll be monitoring.
Mm-hmm. It could be what you like or what you don't like. Doesn't have to be in any particular order.
Can you restate the question?
You're having a problem. You're talking to a friend or a supporter or somebody. What are things you like to hear, or what are things you like the listener to do, and what are things you don't like?
I don't like being told to calm down.
Oh, yes, I totally agree with that. I also don't like being gaslighted.
I don't like actions being taken without my consent.
I like to be left alone.
I like it when I'm not too focused on the issue, that they help me like recontextualize and remind her that there's more that they ground me. I like it when people ground me.
I like when what I share is not shared with other people.
We got folks saying dislike is assumptions being made, being talked down to, being talked over. The popular answer for like is being validated. We're seeing that pop up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I like being asked if I want advice or if I just want to be listened to.
I like hearing like an outside perspective that it's like an outside perspective, but not one that's like both like validating but not my own.
I like being asked what haven't I tried yet. Like one person's making eye contact.
Like you like being asked, what have I not tried yet?
Yes.
Okay.
I like being asked how I would like to be supported.
Excuse typos, I'm trying to type fast.
I like being asked what I want from a conversation. Do I want advice? Do I want to be listened to? Do I want just to like cry to someone? That kind of stuff.
A dislike is being pitied or being spoken to in a patronizing tone.
I like acknowledgement that what I'm going through is shitty, just like naming that it's not fair.
I like corresponding actions that let me know that you heard what I said and that you're also investing into something that's a real resolution and solution.
How about a couple more? Any more don't likes that we would want to add?
A couple of times I saw don't like. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Don't like that pops up is when the person looks distracted or appears not fully attentive.
I want to go ahead and name some neurotypical biases that can come into that, where when we perceive somebody who's not making eye contact or somebody who's fidgeting as being distracted. And I believe there is a role for neurodivergent care providers. And so I think the communication about focus, and I think the attention is important. And we need to name that the models that we tend to get mental health care from frame neurodivergent expressions of care and presence as not being attentive.
Thank you so much for that.
Like
anything else people would like to ask? Go ahead.
I don't like being touched or hugged without being asked.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much. I'm sure if we kept going, there'd be much more to add. But the point that I wanted to make here is that we often think with a crisis, we need somebody with 1,000,000 degrees or whatnot. But actually, often what we need is these basic listening skills. Like people who listen, show that they care, but they're not being judgmental, they're not pitting you, they're respecting your autonomy, they're asking what you want, what you need. You know, so the basic skills that you would use, that you would like when talking to a friend, are the skills that you can use in crisis intervention, right? And I appreciate the comments again about neurodivergence, as well as reflecting that there can be diverse ways to show support. And that's also, I mentioned, in addition to that, something that we need to consider is that, you know, like people, like there's not a one size fits all for support. Does that make sense? We're all different people. We relate to people differently. What works for one person may not work for another person. There's not like the perfect response that works in all cases. So being open to the diversity that might work for different people. And if you recognize, hey, my approach isn't effective, there might be somebody else, and being open to that without feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm a failed kind of crisis counselor. Okay. So with that, again, maybe we'll continue sharing my screen here, kind of going over some basic skills. But before I do that, I wanted to put a little bit of a link here because one, we may not be able to get through all answers and things. And two, you might have a much better idea than any of us have. Everyone's going to have their own knowledge. So this is a little link that's kind of questions and answers. So questions come up to you and we don't have time to get to them. You can put them there, and then you can also look at questions, and if you have a great idea, you can put them there too. And also feel free to share in the chat. I don't agree with that. This is a better idea. I've tried this. So this is trying to create a space for collective sharing, not just our particular thoughts. So hopefully I got this link right. Okay, yeah, so this is a little Google Doc. So again, because we may not be able to get to everyone's thoughts and collectively answer everything, we can continue to do this throughout the 4 weeks. Okay. So continuing on with our presentation here, let's see. Okay, so I wanted to mention that we're gearing this more towards our CAT teams that are expecting to develop rapid response systems in their communities. So there might be differences, similarities, but also differences involving family and friends, but just want to notice what kind of our focus is on. But one thing that can help us de-stress at the idea of crisis intervention is to recognize the limitations of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to figure out everything about that person and solve everyone's problems, which we couldn't do anyway, right? We're trying to get them to the next place that they want to be in order to receive ongoing support. Right? So it's a very limited kind of task that we're trying to do. Like, we're not trying to be the ongoing support, we're trying to get them to the ongoing support. So, and crisis intervention is focused on assisting that person in finding or figuring out what their ongoing support plan could be, or at least the next step to where they could then figure what that might be. So one clue I found in my experience is that if you find yourself in a super, super long situation, this could be a sign that you're moving out of crisis intervention to ongoing support that may not be appropriate. I'll give one example in my early days of crisis counseling where I ended up on a 12-hour call, and that was a mess. That's all I can say about that situation, but I learned my lesson there, right? Now, some calls will be longer than other, right? Some crises might be longer than other. There's not like a set time, but it was clear when I was spending 6 hours talking about movies that I was really out of the crisis intervention model at that point, and it was time to have wrapped up the call. So having a kind of clarity of what you're trying to accomplish, you can end up avoiding these 12-hour calls that I ended up being on. Okay, so sorry, I'm just having trouble clicking to the next thing. Cindy, can you help me? I can't figure out it. I'm clicking the arrow, but it's not doing anything. It's just drawing now. Oh, I see. I pressed the draw button. Okay. Cindy, can you help me? It's stuck on a draw thing, and I can't get it to stop drawing.
Do you want me to share mine with the?
Okay, no, I got it. Okay.
Okay.
So ignore random drawings on this, sorry. Okay, so anyway, continuing on. We'll discuss this a little bit more later, but having clear boundaries of what you're willing to do and sticking to them is also very important, because in a crisis, you can get drawn into things you don't feel comfortable with without thinking. So what your boundaries might be somebody's different from someone else's, but knowing that in advance so that you're prepared to respond when your boundaries might be overstepped. In general, I would say it's better just to offer less and not disappoint than to offer too much that you can't then carry through with, right? Because you can always offer more later, but offer what you know you can come through with rather than things that you can't come through with. Also, it's very good to have resources in advance for ongoing support. Like if you know this kind of thing might happen, figuring out in advance what some options might be for that person, rather than trying to scramble and trying to figure stuff out in the moment of a crisis. But again, in the end, one wants to respect the autonomy of the person who is in crisis. It's their decision, and gain consent before you even try to act or intervene in the first place. Okay, so back to kind of our abolitionist principles. Again, remember, our goal isn't to save the person, right? Our goal isn't to make the decisions for the person, and that can be hard if it feels like the person's making a very self-harming decision. But we can be there to help them think through those decisions and perhaps offer options that can reduce harm. But in the end, that's their decision to make. And in addition, I think it's also important to be aware of any legal resources to offer resources you offer, right? So if you suggest, or maybe you want to talk to your counselor, but it's around their child that could lead to mandated reporting, they should at least know that could be a consequence for any options that you suggest. Okay, so some general listening skills which we're going to practice soon is, 1, introducing yourself, gaining consent.
Can you slow down a
first
bit?
before... Sure.
We need to go like 2 slides back.
Oh, okay. Oh, oops, I missed a slide here. Okay. So, anything else you want to see? I mean, don't feel the need to write down the slides because we will give everyone the slides. So, if you're trying to take notes, you'll get all the slides later. Are we ready to move on, or anything else? Okay. Okay, so I skipped this slide by accident. But in any case, also keep in mind that there isn't a situation where we can fix everything, right? So there's no recipe that will ensure that everything will go well. We can only do our best and learn from each other. And that's the doc I just put in the chat. So this is a place where you can crowdsource any questions or answers that you have, or suggestions that you have. It's basically the more you practice, the better it is. And this is why we will be doing endless amounts of role plays during this training, because the more you try it, the better things will work in the future. But even then, that doesn't mean it will work in all cases. When I first started this, my sister would give me the most nightmarish role plays on the planet that would give me bad dreams. But the positive side was when I actually had real calls, they didn't seem so bad, and I was like ready to go. So even the things you fear, the more you practice, the more you will be able to respond in a crisis situation. But there may be times when you can't intervene, like you might need to prioritize your safety. It's okay, because we haven't figured out an option, and that's okay to do too, to recognize what your limits are. And then finally, until we create the abolitionist future, we may not always have the options we would like. Like you might have a person says, like, I think we just have to call 911 now. Again, that doesn't mean you sold out. It just means we have more work to do to create other options, right? So with that, then let's go to the next slide. Oops. Okay, so as I mentioned, back to kind of basic listening skills. Introducing yourself, gaining consent first, if it's okay to intervene, especially like if you're showing up in a situation. And also it's good to first verify if they are in a safe place first, and if not, help them get to a safe place. Trying to avoid judgmental statements like, why are you doing this? And in fact, I would say generally avoiding why questions is often good, like rephrasing it instead of, well, why do you feel that way, to, well, what makes you feel this way, can just sound less interrogating. It's also good not to presume what you're hearing, but to verify it frequently, because you can presume and just be wrong, but also verifying it can also help clarify for that person what they're saying. So just frequently saying, I'm hearing you say this, is that correct? just to make sure you're getting at what they're trying to communicate. And then, of course, with COVID, we have to be very careful, but in general, any time before touching anyone, you always want to ask permission before you make physical contact with somebody. Some other just general tips, and we kind of went over this when we were talking about listening skills, like conveying empathy without always talking about yourself. Like sometimes we try to relate to each other, like that happened to me, but before you know it, it's all about you now. When you can't just say that just sounds really hard. Right? That still conveys empathy while centering that person. Kind of avoiding, I know what you're going through. Also just being comfortable with silence. Like sometimes people just need someone to be there. You don't have to fill every empty thing with words. Like if someone's just crying, you can just say, it's okay to cry. I'll be here while you're crying. And while you want to be supportive, it's also okay to assert your limits if someone's being abusive or otherwise overstepping the boundaries. You can just say, I want to support you, but I can't do this. But this is what I can do instead. And then finally, if you get stuck, you're like, I don't know what to say in this situation. You're just lost. You can always say, how can I be of most support to you right now? You can ask for guidance for that person on what would be supportive for them.
We have a question
Okay,
from the
so
chat, Andy.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
They say, should we also avoid language like "I feel you"? Does that have the same vibe as "I know what you're going through"?
I don't know. What do you all think? I don't feel that way. Again, there's not one answer, but does I feel you sound off-putting? What do people just put it in the chat? What are your thoughts?
From a cultural perspective, I'm sorry, I'm not doing this in the chat, but as a Black person, I feel you does not mean I know what you're going through. It means I understand where you're coming from. And if it feels awkward to you to say that, then it's gonna come out awkward. If that is how you talk, it's gonna come out, like intonation is important. So, but I think it's also important to understand who you're talking to. If you can code switch, then code switch. Like maybe if, I run up or encounter, someone on the street who may not be part of our community, I'm probably going to speak differently anyways. And saying, oh yeah, I feel you is not something that's going to come out of my mouth. But once I get to know a person, or if I get, let's trust our intuition. And that's a whole other workshop, right? We can talk about, but when you're engaging with someone, you kind of feel out how to engage with that person if you're paying attention to yourself and to the other person. And so you have an idea. But be natural is part of it too, because throughout all of this, if you're trying to put on a certain role, it comes out, it comes across. So be who you are, be you.
Exactly. This is Danny. I just wanted to add one point to that. AMJ, that's a very good comment. Folks, hopefully you join us next week. We're going to go more in depth, like I said, with de-escalation, and I get very personal with this. AMJ is also helping me present a Rupi as well. And they have a lot of experience in the medical profession and with de-escalation as well, and working with patients with mental disabilities, etc. So yeah, that'll be really informative, and we could talk about this more intense, but keep the comments going in the chat. This is a very informative and important conversation to have. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think one thing you can also consider is if you're not sure, you can also ask. If it feels off-putting to say, did that feel off-putting to you? Or is that okay if I say, so does that make sense? You don't have to think of the miracle answers. You can also check in with the person you're talking to see if what you're saying is resonating. So let's see, I think with that, I'm going to hand this over to Ezra who is going to do a little exercise to get us started. Cindy, should I send it over, stop sharing for you to do this share? I'll assume yes.
Did you hear me? Oh, I'm like, yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. It works out for you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ezra. My pronouns are they, them, he, him. I just want to take a moment to say, like, I'm so excited to see the amount of people here. And I just want to express my gratitude for each and every one of you that is carving time out of your day to be here with us. It really means so much. I know each and every one of you has obligations and responsibilities and efforts that go into being you. So, thank you first and foremost for being here. So with that, let's get started on some exercises. So if everyone could grab a piece of paper or something to write with, or maybe go into your notes app, and if you could write down what you would say after a person in crisis does or says any of the following. And I do want to highlight that for everyone to write word for word what you would say in these situations. And then afterwards, you can write your answers down in the chat or your answers out loud. I will be writing my own answers as well, and I'll be sharing them as well after. So let's go over the questions. So just to reiterate, you would be writing down word for word what you would say if a person in crisis says or does any of the following. The first question would be, what would you do if you were in my position, right? And I'll give you each a minute or so to think about your answers, write them down. And then I'm going to move on to the second question. And so what would you do if a person in crisis says, if a person in crisis is crying and isn't speaking? What would you do then? And I'll give you each a minute again or so. And then moving on to the next one. What would you do if a person in crisis said to you, "It's all my fault"? What would you do or say to that? All right, and then on to the next one. What would you do or say if a person in crisis said frantically to you, "Can you help me?" What would you say to that? What would you do to that? Yeah, I'm sorry, I can slow down. Do you guys need me to repeat anything? Okay. I'll give you a couple minutes to think about your answers to these questions. Okay, thank you for telling me. Okay, so you'll each have a few minutes to think about your answers, and and then we'll regroup, and then we will share our answers. You can share them in the chat if you'd like, or you can say it out loud. So I see some answers in the chat already. Thank you all for sharing. Okay, does anyone want to share their answers for the first question? Feel free to, or you can just write it in the chat.
My answer was, that's a really good question. I don't share your experience and so can't bring your expertise to the situation. Here are some things I'm hearing you say that you might want to focus on.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing. I'll go ahead and share my answer to that. So I would make sure not to tell them what to do.
It seems like that's what most of the responses are saying that too. I can't tell you what to do, but let's go through your options that you think are best for you.
Hey, this is Danny. So, I mean, is giving suggestions to somebody that needs help the same thing as telling them what to do? That's my question, right? So I think it's the way and the tone of how you frame the questions too, right? So it's not, you need to do this, but hey, if I was in this position, I like to use I statements. So, that can also be a way of doing that too, right?
I think you could frame it in a way that's not about what you would do, but frame it in, well, let's see what options could be possible. What do you think about this? Does that make sense? So it's focusing on what's for them rather than what options you would see for yourself. So I think you can address both together.
And I think that is really important because this is a person wanting, well, this may be a person wanting someone else to tell them what to do, and it may not be, right? And so the goal is, if this person is in crisis, to allow them to feel in control again. And so reaching out to ask somebody else for what to do is actually them giving up that control. And in the end, it may come back to bite you in the ass because, well, you said that you would blah, 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 and I really respect you, so I tried it. But like the first person said, like, I'm not in your position, like, exactly. Even if I were facing the same issues, I'm not you, right? And so I would frame it in the sense of, I would look into my own expertise and see what I already know about, and ask for whatever I needed. I want to make sure that we focus on you understanding where you are awesome in this situation, right? And so helping them understand that they can take control, and it takes the pressure off of us to have to be great with solutions. And it also lets them know that they are actually in more control than they may feel.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I think those are really good points. And I think we should also recognize where they are in their bodies. When traumatic things happen, a response that we can have is to shut down and freeze or not be able to think or process anything. So thinking about, why would this person ask me this question? We can also think about what's going on in their bodies, what are they able to do? And so if they're not able to feel anything and they're trying to reach out and get some direction on what to do or how to make themselves feel different, I think acknowledging or just validating that state of being and going from there, just like you said, helping that person have the guidance and direction to try to listen to themselves, to try to feel what's going on, or just to try to be present, is definitely the only thing that's going to be the right decision. It's also the only thing that's going to be helpful for them.
Yes.
I mean, yes, but what if somebody's in psychosis and they don't have, so we need to talk about stuff like that too. But sorry, I think Martha is on stack, but thank you for that comment, Laura. That's important, and AMJ as well, and everybody commenting.
Yeah, these are all wonderful and incredible responses. Thank you all for sharing those.
I think I had a comment as well.
Oh, sorry.
We're actually running a little bit out of time now.
Oh, okay.
So what we might need to do, just to get through everything else, is if we could put the comments in the chat, and if people feel comfortable, we can make the chat available so people can see the ideas, if that would work.
All right. So with that said, thank you all for sharing your responses in the chat. I've seen some really amazing things. And with that said, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so now that that's finished, we'll be moving on to some role plays with Andy and Sydney. So Andy and Sydney will be doing a demonstration role playing a person in crisis and the other as a responder. So I'll give them the stage.
So in no way am I an expert, but let's do this one.
So we're just going to do a model, not to say this is the ideal way to handle it, but just so you can know what you'll be doing in your small groups. Okay. So, ring, ring.
Hello?
Can you help me? Can you please help me? I don't know what's going on. Help, help.
Okay.
Where am I?
Hi, where are you okay? Do you think, are you in a safe space?
I don't know. I don't know.
What's your name?
I don't want to tell you. I don't know you.
Oh, okay, let's breathe. Is there anywhere where you're at? Do you see any lights? Do you see any place where you can walk to that feels a little bit maybe safer? I'm here with you. Okay, let's breathe.
I see a drugstore. Do you think they'll be nice to me?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna be here to make sure that you're okay. If you want to walk through it, closer to it, if you see a light, can you walk to it? Do you see any streets or anything that you
Yeah, I see a street.
Do you see any names on there?
Yeah, it's Bellflower. It's Bellflower. It's by the
Okay.
drugstore.
Is there anything else you want me to call you by if you're not comfortable sharing your name?
Can you help me? Can you come? Can you come? Can someone help me?
I can send somebody to Bellflower. Can you walk towards the location? As there's people there, you probably feel I'm here with you. Just let's breathe. I'm walking with you.
Will they be mean to me? Will they be mean? Will they be okay?
Hopefully they'll be okay. Let's keep going. But if not, I'm here. I'll be okay with you. Let's breathe. I'm getting somebody here to send somebody. Bellflower. Is there any crossing street?
Stern.
Stern? Okay, so maybe we'll get something through there. Is there something in specific? What happened? Can you tell me a little bit about what happened or what's going on?
Okay, so we'll stop. Okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, I was just going to say thank you, Sydney and Andy, for those amazing acting skills. And now we're going to be putting everyone into small groups so that you could role play amongst each other, following like the same model that Sydney and Andy did. You'll each have 15 minutes to do this role play. And if you have any additional time, you can reverse. Right. So now that we're back, we're going to move on to our next exercise, which is stating our boundaries, right? So when doing crisis intervention, stating our boundaries of what we're willing and not willing to do is super important. We don't want to make any unmet promises. So if you could all write down what you wouldn't and wouldn't feel comfortable doing in the chat or in your piece of paper or in your notes app. And if you could just respond to the first question, which is, if you are doing crisis intervention, what are some things you would not feel comfortable doing? And I'll give you some time to write your answers down. So for me personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable giving someone a ride somewhere, only because my car does have some issues and I wouldn't feel like it's pretty reliable. But I would suggest either to offer a ride from a trusted source, or if they're okay with using a ride sharing app. I see some responses already. Thank you all for sharing again.
There's some things people are saying they wouldn't feel comfortable breaking up a fight, not feeling comfortable giving out phone numbers, touching, putting someone in their car, giving too much personal information, like their address. So those are some examples people are giving.
These are some really good responses. Some of them like I didn't even think of. So thank you all for sharing. Okay. Someone said telling them my full name, and that's a really good one. I can 100% relate to that. Okay. So thank you all for sharing your answers. We'll move on to the second one. And we're going to be doing a role play exercise where someone or the person in crisis will ask the responder for something the responder is not comfortable with. And the intervener or the rapid responder will need to say beforehand to the person in crisis what they are uncomfortable with. And again, for this role play exercise, you'll have about 15 minutes. We'll make sure that you guys have a lot more time for this one. And your 15 minutes will start now.
So the next slide. Yeah, great. Okay, so in any case, what I have found is a helpful orientation toward, especially for an abolitionist framework, is beginning with the presumption that the person in crisis has the right to decide if they want to live or die. This makes all the difference because, one, if you don't think they have the right, this is where you are going to quickly end up in a carceral solution, where you're going to force them into something. They might end up in for psychiatric care because you are going to decide they must live even if they don't want to make that decision. Right? Second of all, if you feel like you must save them at all costs, regardless of their decision, it just creates so much stress for you, right? Because you feel like it's on your shoulders to save a person's life. And this can just be extremely overwhelming. So if we begin first with affirming in our heads, they have that right to decide, and I can't save that person. However, that doesn't mean I can't do anything that's not very important. Given that decision, you can't undo that decision. You can support them to make sure they've completely thought it through, that they've really contemplated their options, seen their possibilities. Then that can make all the difference. And I'll just say from my experience, what I've often found is that when you force someone into care, that often delays their decision, but doesn't reverse it, right? And also it alienates that person from coming back to you for help, right? Because now they feel they can't trust you.
Co-sign that. Because I've had, sorry, I'm just jumping in real quick, but the job I had by law, like I had to call people, call 911 on people, and I have never seen or heard back from any of the folks who, even though we did it, you know, in as voluntary a way as possible, meaning that we did it together, I never heard back from any of those folks. So definitely, if you're not in a place that's forcing you to do it, and even if you are, see what you can do to avoid that.
Hopelessness. But also I want to kind of stress at the bottom is that sometimes a person after deep depression might start to look more happy, and you might think they're out of the woods, but that's not necessarily the case, right? Sometimes people make a decision for suicide and are in a better spirit because they've made that decision. So that's something else also to be attentive to. So the next slide.
Andy, we have a question in the chat asking, there is suicidal ideation and active suicidal states. Is this part of the training?
Right, we're going to kind of talk about this. Okay, maybe I'm going to go through all this, and then can you bring that up? Does that make sense at the end to see? Because we're going to talk about different responses for that. Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Sorry, can I follow up? Can I interject with another question?
Sure.
Someone asked, what about jokes? Are we including jokes about it in this?
Yes. Yeah, if someone jokes about it, you still want to respond to it, because people often say things as a joke that's actually not a joke. So it may be a joke, does that make sense? And that person can say, oh, I was joking, right? They can clarify, but you don't want to assume it's a joke. You want to verify that it was a joke. Okay, so in any case, first, in terms of de-escalating, we want to just think about the basic crisis intervention skills that we went over, right? Building rapport, asking them what's going on without judgment, asking their names and pronouns, active listening, and as I kind of just hinted at, clarifying what they're saying, not assuming what they're saying. And also, it can be very helpful if you're doing a team to have a backup person to assist, if at all possible, because ideally you don't want to get off the phone with that person, but you might need to check a resource or see if something's available or get a car ready or whatever that response is, call a cousin or something, so that one person can stay connected to that person the whole time till you get them to the next place, while the other person can do any work that might need happening. So the next slide. So generally speaking, in terms of suicide, there tends to be a mystification of it because we're uncomfortable even talking about it, right? If somebody says, I want to kill myself, the first response would be, oh, don't say that, you have so much to live for, right? And the conversation gets shut down. And the result is that creates more mystique. We may be afraid to talk about it directly because we're thinking, will that give that person more of an idea? But actually, it's often the opposite, right? Not talking about it makes the idea build and build, whereas the more we directly address it, it can demystify it, make it look like one decision that you can then critically think, is this actually a good decision? So it's often good to be very direct in asking about if somebody is thinking of killing themselves. So my suggestion would be the minute you hear anything, even if it's vague, even if it sounds joking, even if you're not sure, right? It could be someone said ideation, but they don't have a plan. But nevertheless, you don't know, so you just want to directly get to that. So have you been thinking of killing yourself? At that point, I think it's good then to see how much of an immediate situation is this, right? Is this just kind of thoughts that they're having, or do they have a plan that they're ready to do right now, right? So it's good to follow up with, have you thought of how you might kill yourself, and have you thought of when? So if someone says, which I've had, I have a knife at my heart right now, you're dealing with a different situation. It says, no, I don't know. I probably not. I just feel like I don't want to exist. Right? So you have a different a response depending on the answer that you get. And then just continuing to ask about their plan, like if what would it entail, what makes them feel this way, how long have they been feel this way, just talking very, very specifically about what's happening. So next slide. Okay. So overall, kind of the flow you can think about is build rapport, you're asking direct questions. The more you talk about it, you sense, hey, are we in a different space then? Reassess, and then see if they are interested in another plan, right? Do they want to go someplace that they can get some rest? Is there a place they can get support? The rationale, again, for asking explicit questions is that this what tends to demystify suicide. It tends to de-escalate it, because it becomes a thing. Okay, I could do that, but then, you know, that I wouldn't get what I want. I'm just feeling bad, and if I say this, you know, this is my way of expressing how bad I feel, but I won't get what I want because I won't be there to see how sorry everyone is. Right? So the more you directly ask about it, the more the plan seems less of just this obscure thing and more of a thing. I don't know if this is really what I want, right? So you're helping them to fully assess, is this the decision they actually want to make? Okay.
One quick thing is just that I think it often helps people feel less alone when it's directly addressed, because them even having brought it up or reaching out to you is a sign. You know, it's a sign, it's a request. It's you know, they're not just keeping it up to themselves, and if you ignore it or deflect it, it makes them feel more alone a lot of times, I think.
I agree. So next slide. Okay.
Quick comment. Someone did message me saying, I will respectfully disagree with this framing of suicidality.
Feel free to do that. If you want to put, like in the questions and answers or the source book, you know, you can put that there. So feel free to disagree and offer your thoughts. And disagree on anything any of us are saying. So this is kind of sharing our collective thoughts and wisdom. Okay.
Thank you.
There's, I think, a really great, poignant question in the chat. How far does the logic of the right to decide go? If someone is considering a method of suicide that is likely to be ineffective, but potentially harm them permanently or injure others, like driving at full speed into a building, do we advise them against those particular means?
My thought about this would be like and next week we'll be talking about de-escalation when we're trying to address when somebody thinks they might be harming others, right? But some similar principles arise as the more you talk about it, like what will happen if this happens? Is there something else we can do? If we have kind of a harm reduction approach, is there another possibility? Then we can more likely end up with a different outcome. Okay. So next slide. I'll just skip this just for time's sake. Okay, so this is a possible flow that you could think about that might help guide a call. So if someone expresses anything that might sound like they might be having suicidal thoughts, you can just say, have you been thinking of killing yourself? Then the next step, you're asking direct questions to ascertain the immediate risk. Have you thought of when? What method will you use? If you perceive an immediate risk, then you can say, are they willing, would they like to go somewhere now for immediate support? And here's where it's good to know what that could be. All the possible ranges. Is there a respite home? They might want to go to hospitals, but you want to know what that hospital's like. In my experience, there were some hospitals that would very much forcibly medicate you, but others that would not. So you can put the full range. Do they have family they want to go to? And, you know, offer those options and then try to be with them till they get to that place, depending on what your setting is. Like, do you have a car you can take them? Can you Uber? Is there someone else, you know, they know that you can get them to that place? So having those in mind at first is very helpful. If not, even if it's not, doesn't seem to be an immediate threat, you still want to have them have the opportunity to think through everything that they're thinking. You know, it could even be like, what would your funeral look like? What are things you would miss? Have you felt this way before? What got you through that? Are those things that could help you get through this now, right? So in either case, you're still being as direct as possible to help them come up with either a place to go right in the immediate future, or at least a plan for how they can deal with their feelings in the future. Okay. So next slide. Okay. So in my experience, so let's say it's a more immediate, you feel like there could be a more immediate threat. I found then keep talking about it as we said, like what would what's making you feel this way, what would happen if you did kill yourself, what has gotten you through before, just talking and seeing, are things going to feeling a little more de-escalated. Then at that point, well, would you like to go someplace where you can get support? If it looks like you never get to that place, and this can be the scary part, but I've been in this situation too. Sometimes I found it helpful to have an intermediary thing. So is it okay if we call you tomorrow to see if you would like to go someplace tomorrow? And I've generally found pretty much all the time, even if they're not willing to go now, if they've had time to think about it and you're keeping the relationship with them, then they often will want to go someplace the next day. Right? Another possible suggestion, this may not come easily, but a thing that can be helpful, and I will direct everyone again to the Fire Week Collective, but having advanced psychiatric directives can also be a helpful tool to let people know about if they find themselves in a situation where they think they might want to go to the hospital, but they want to have more control over the care that they get. So this can be a helpful thing to do in our providing care. Okay. So any questions? Well, there might be a million at this point, but is there a few questions we can address? And again, you can put them in the Google source doc. In the next slide.
Sorry, Andy, following up on what you just said, the Google source doc, can we have a link for that, please?
Yeah, let me pull it up again. Hold on.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So I'm just calling it crowdsource doc. Or crowdsource questions. Okay, so with that, we have yet another role play. So the idea will be that one person will be expressing suicidal thoughts in some way. Again, I think somebody suggested think of yourself as playing a character, not necessarily yourself, if that is of help. Feel free to not respond, participate if you don't feel comfortable. And then have someone else be the responder. And then if you have opportunity, then you can switch and do as many as you can. Is there some, obviously, do you want to mention the alternative framework? I can't really see chat, so it's hard for me to respond, but do you want to mention it briefly? Or can someone say it from the chat?
Sorry, y'all, I didn't mean to distract from the training. It's just that we work on normalizing suicidality because it's something that most people struggle with. And this is something that we have seen in all the years we have worked. Like, oh, I've never been suicidal, but then I go to church and I'm like, oh, please, God, take me. Okay, so you're not calling it suicidality, but it's suicidality. And suicide is a response to something else usually, and particularly, well, first of all, it can be a response to something else. So to have a conversation about your life in general, that can make the feeling pass, particularly if like you are like us as Fire Week Collective and a lot of the members that we serve, we are chronically suicidal. This is it's something that we deal with all the time. So when you put a stop and you focus the conversation on that, you can actually become really obsessed into it and really more energized and convinced instead of just having a conversation about your life. Like, tell me about your pets. Tell me what a perfect day looks like to you. Tell me what kind of joy you had last month or last year, and enter that conversation into suicide later, after that you have put some grounding into people's life. and the part of their lives. Like Azaria, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, said, people often want to kill part of themselves. So reinforcing or reminding them of the parts that they don't want to let go of, and then start the conversation when you're grounded on that part, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining it right. I'm trying to be brief because it's your training.
Right.
Sorry.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I kind of, I'll just say from my experience, I found them kind of go together, if that makes sense. Like, to me, talking directly is actually what kind of normalizes suicide, if that makes sense. Because you start to talk about it as a thing that's not like this weird mystical thing that only a few people think about, that helps to de-escalate. But I hear what you're saying, depending on how people respond. If they're not saying, oh, no, I'm just feeling bad, then that could be a cue that you would focus on how they're feeling or how their life is versus, hey, I have a thing right here that I'm ready to take action on.
Yeah, I
anyway,
think for us it's important
sorry.
to not put a hard stop, because that is how things become mystified. We put somebody said something, we need to put a hard stop and talk about this. When if you do it more organically and you don't do that hard stop and you don't focus on that, then you normalize feelings and you normalize the experience. This is in our experience and our framework, which is, of course, not the only one and not the one that always works.
Yeah, so I would say we have to put not hard stop in balance with not avoiding. Does that make sense? Because another thing can happen is that people give like a sign and we cue upon everything but that, and then that turns out to be the thing that's really what's going on. So I think keeping the both in balance is in my experience, is important. Okay, so we were going to do, I wonder, we're kind of running close out of time. We were going to do a little demonstration, but I'm thinking, is that necessary? Or would we prefer to just go into the small groups now? What would be people's preference? We can get a quick.
My honest opinion is I think a demonstration might be more helpful than small groups. The small groups I've been in, it seems very unguided, and like situations have to come up on their own. That's just my opinion.
Okay, well, I'll do a little demonstration then, and we might not, well, anyway, we'll do a demonstration, then we can see if people feel like doing the groups. If not, we might be able to blend the two role plays into the next section. Okay, so Cindy.
I have a question. Would it benefit everybody if I put the slide of the general flow just so that people can also guide themselves through it a little bit while we do the...
So this time Cindy's going to be the caller, but feel free again to put in chat if you would say something differently or if you have a different approach so we can see the full range of possibilities.
And also just a reminder, if you don't want to participate or if you're more comfortable sitting out, you can mute us or like turn the volume down and take a second for yourself.
So, ring, ring.
Hello, this is Andy.
Hello. I don't know why I'm calling. I don't want to be here. I feel like I'm trapped. I don't know why I'm calling. I just don't find the purpose of me. I feel like I'm in danger for myself right now.
I hear you say you don't want to be here anymore. I mean, have you been thinking of killing yourself?
You know, I guess it's crossed my mind at times, but I don't know if I really mean it. Like, you know.
Have you thought about how you might kill yourself?
How? No, not necessarily how.
What has been making you feel this way right now?
It's just so much going on. Stressed out. I've lost family during this pandemic. I feel like I'm just burdening everybody around me. I don't know what the purpose of me being here is right now. I'm tired.
What's making you feel that you're a burden?
I just feel that way. I don't know.
Have you felt this way before?
Yeah, at times I have in the past.
What got you through those times before?
I had never really stopped to think about it, but I don't know. Sometimes it just goes away. I forget.
Do you have any family or friends who could support you or be with you right now?
I haven't tried ask or reaching out. I feel if I'm a little embarrassed to ask for help sometimes.
What makes you feel embarrassed?
I don't want to get in trouble that I'm admitting that I'm thinking about these things.
Are there people in your life that you feel you can tell people about this?
Maybe I haven't tried.
For right now, do you feel like there's a place you can go that you know of, or would you want to go to a place like actually, can I find out what area you're in?
I'm in the Monterey Park.
Okay. So if there is a respite home in your area, I don't know if you'd be interested in that, if you kind of need some time to kind of take a break and get some support.
What's a respite home? Is it free?
Yeah, it's free, and you can just go there and take a few days to, take a little break from things and get some support for what you're going through right now.
Would I get in trouble if I'm there?
Yeah, we've clarified with them that they won't. Well, can I just clarify what trouble are you afraid might happen?
If I say I'm suicidal, will they try to keep me there, or will my legal status affect it?
Okay. Well, we talked to them and they said that they don't do forced care and that they don't check on legal status. But if you would like to, I can, while I'm talking to you, have my partner call them and confirm this and confirm that they do have a space. Is that something you might be interested in?
Yeah, I guess that sounds like something I could give it a try.
Okay. Okay, we'll stop for now. Okay, so I'm hearing some thoughts, diving into specific questions. So these are good thoughts. I tend to think, where do they need to be? It sounded like from what this person was saying was that they really did need to be with people right now, but other calls, that's not the case. And then to me, then it just becomes more focusing on their feelings at the time. But anyway, so thank you. So do people want to do, actually, I think at this point we don't actually have time, unfortunately. So I think what we'll do is not do a role play, and we'll see if we can blend this into another role play. And we'll take a 5-minute break right now.
All right, thank you. All right, so now that we're moving on to self-harm, and because we're going to be talking about some pretty heavy things, I think it would be beneficial if we all just took a deep breath and just kind of spend a moment to kind of connect to our bodies and our breath. I also have a habit of forgetting to breathe when I speak. So if you'd like to join me, please feel free. I'll be using the same model that Cindy suggested earlier. So we'll inhale for 4, pause for 4, and exhale for 4. And I will be signing it off by seconds with my hand because it's hard for me to talk like while I'm trying to get a deep breath in. So if you'd like to join me, you can do it with me. So we'll be inhaling for 4 seconds again, pausing for 4 seconds again, and exhaling for 4 seconds again. You can join me. Okay. All right. Now, before I get started on this presentation, I wanted to first define what self-harm is. And so self-harm is any type of behavior where you are intentionally inflicting an injury on yourself. And the reason why self-harm is not the same as being suicidal is because there's a difference. And the difference between self-harm and suicide is that suicide is any intentional act or behavior that could lead up to death or for the potential of death. And self-harm is a way of coping with immense pain. Oh, I'm so sorry. Forgot to mention that if someone self-harms, it doesn't always mean they are suicidal. And like I was saying, self-harm is a way of coping with immense pain. And so self-harm is actually a secondary reaction. So we may be depressed, we may have anxiety, we may have borderline personality disorder, and we start self-harming as a result, if that makes sense. So we self-harm as a way to cope with what has happened to us, and that's what makes it secondary. Now, the best way to address self-harm is through a harm reduction approach. And harm reduction is really about reducing the risk of harm in high-risk acts or behavior. And I really love the definition that Rachel Rowan Olive used in her article of harm reduction for young people who self-harm, because she explained it as harm reduction is an approach to self-harm aimed at keeping long-term damage and frequency of an injury to a minimum, rather than stopping it immediately or completely. And then we also want to keep in mind not to pathologize the self-harm behaviors or insist that they must stop. And what I mean by that is that we want to leave our biases and our quick judgments at home. And that even means intellectualizing things, right? We cannot take away their behaviors, nor should we intend to. And if people are going to engage in self-harm, we want to encourage that they do it safely and not insist that they stop completely. And then we also want to give space for the person to talk about why they engaged in self-harm. So we can invite them to share what emotional difficulties they're experiencing, and letting your actions convey that you are making real attempts to understand what's going on, right? Like in body language, mimicking their stance or movements, also eye contact. And then we want to explore how they can reduce harm when they engage in these behaviors. So if they are cutting themselves, can they make sure to sanitize the cutting instruments and reduce the depth of cuts, right? And we want to explore alternatives for other behaviors that will result in less harm. And we'll get into some examples of safer alternatives later. And then Sydney, if you'd like to move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. And so we want to directly ask how they are harming themselves. like Andy suggested earlier, you can ask how and with what means, right? And you can also ask about their care before and after. For example, what does the process of cleaning up look like for you? Another one is, what kind of dressings do you use for your wounds? Also, what do you do to prevent infections, right? And then I do want to emphasize that we want to provide a non-judgmental tone and be as non-reactive as possible, right? And last, we want to, make sure that we know that this is their way of coping, right? People self-harm as a way to cope with emotional pain and overwhelming emotions. And like I said before, we can't take away someone's pain, and aiming to do that is invalidating, right? We all have worthy things to feel pain and hurt over. And then we can provide options like questions such as, what would it look like to sanitize your blade? What would it look like to band your wounds, right? And we can also ask about directing emotions to an alternative object, such as punching a pillow, squeezing fruit. And, self-harm looks different to everyone. And some ways to self-harm are more stigmatized than others, right? So like eating a lot of sugar is not pathologized as much as substance use. And then we also have some self-inflicted injury substitutes. So you can color your body and you can like ask a person where they would normally harm themselves or where they intended to. And then they could like draw a red line on themselves instead. But we do suggest that you use a non-toxic art supplies. You can also hold an ice cube in your hand, and the pain from that ice cube resemble the pain from a self-injury, but the result isn't going to be as harmful or dangerous to your body. And you can also plunge your arm into a bucket of ice water, because the shock of the cold and the pain from this will resemble the pain from a self-inflicted injury. You could also play an audio tape or a videotape of yourself that you've recorded previously, and in that tape, you could state all the reasons why you like yourself and why you should not hurt yourself. And that can raise your self-awareness and may make you feel loved, right? And you could also call, write, or visit a friend, a family member, a significant other, or a therapist. And then, like I suggested earlier, some harm reduction skills could be splashing water on your face, which can help alter your concentration and your attention and physical sensation. You could also take a bath or a shower, and by immersing yourself in either warm or cold water, that can change your body's temperature and change your physical sensation. And you could also make your body as tense as you can. So when you release this tension, your body will feel more relaxed. And you can also change the temperature of your environment. It can be either really warm or really cold. And creating such a drastic change in temperature can alter how you feel physically, and can also help reduce or eliminate dissociation. And then we also have a Skillshare for everyone. And if you have any harm reduction substitute suggestions, we would really love to hear about them. And you can use this QR code or the link at the very bottom to leave your suggestions. You can visit this link, and please feel free to share this with everyone.
I put the link in the chat as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Andy. And
I think we have time.
Do we have time to have people pick it out a little bit?
I think we can do the EFT if we can do it. It's not too long.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to suggest this exercise, an EFT exercise, which basically stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And it's an alternative treatment for physical pain and emotional distress. It's also referred to as EFT tapping or psychological acupressure. And it's kind of similar to acupuncture in that it focuses on the meridian points or the energy hotspots to restore balance to your body's energy. It's been used to treat PTSD and anxiety, and it's designed to help calm the nervous system. So we can all start off. It is an interactive exercise. So if you're able to, please join me. And I'll be demonstrating it for you all. So we're gonna first start off by getting all 4 fingers, and then you can lightly tap on the inside of your hand, like your palms right here. You can just do that. You can tap lightly. A few seconds, maybe a little more. And then we'll move on to the next hand, and you just lightly tap all 4 fingers.
Something really important to this is the uplifting, the words of affirmation while you're tapping.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like you don't click a dog just for no reason. You click because they did something good. You're tapping wherever you're tapping and saying something like, I am at peace and can find peace in the midst of a storm, or whatever affirmations you need.
Yes, thank you, AMJ. I was just about to say that while you're doing this, you can say any affirming thing to yourself. So I'll just be saying to myself, like, I feel safe and supported. And I'll just be saying that throughout. But you can obviously say to yourself in your head or aloud what you feel like you need to hear. So then after we do our hands, we're going to move on to the top of our heads. And you're just going to lightly tap on the top of your head. So I was saying earlier, I am safe. I am supported. And then we're going to move underneath our eyebrows. So I am safe. I am supported. And then we're going to move to the temples of our head. I am safe. I'm supported. And then we're going to go underneath our eyes, on our eyelids. I am safe. I'm supported. And then we're going to go on our Cupid's bow, repeating any affirmation to yourself. And then we'll move to our chin. I feel safe. I feel supported. And then we're going to move underneath our collarbones. Make sure you can see it. I am safe. I feel supported. So the affirmation I'm telling myself is, I feel safe and I feel supported. And then we're going to move to our underneath our rib cage. And again, telling yourself words of affirmation. So I feel safe. I feel supported. And now we're done. I'm just going to take a quick...
So everyone, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
I just say we're going to, since we're running a little time, we're going to kind of combine the role plays into one thing. So you have 3 options in their small groups. You can do a role play on suicide. You can do a role play involving someone who's talking about self-harm, or you don't have to do a role play at all. You could just get in your group and discuss questions or things that are coming up or processing things.
You want to do this one? To those who are still here. Okay, what we're going to be doing right now, it's one of the grounding techniques that we had for the PTSD, anxiety in general presentation was the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So what we would be doing is just in your space, we're going to be seeking to say out loud or maybe in our heads as a way to ground ourselves back. What are 5 things that you are looking at? So everybody can just follow along. So I could say I see a black TV. I see white painted walls. I see the color red. I see a brown door. I see a yellow light. And then I could do 4 touches, which are 4 things that I can touch. I can say I feel the wood, or I feel the roughness of my skin, or I feel the cold of a glass of water. I feel the tightness of my headphones in my ear. And 3, I hear my dog making noise. I hear the sound of the headphones. I hear outside vehicles. I smell 2 things. I smell food. I smell beans, or I smell a perfume, and maybe something that you can taste, or that will trigger that sense. I can taste water, or if you don't have anything, sometimes in a moment of crisis or just of anxiety and so on, you can just even like lick your well, maybe not right now during COVID, but like saying, oh, I can't taste something. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in this order, but it's just to make you ground yourself and come back from whatever memory or anxiety or moment of flashback you're going through. And I guess that one's nice to share right now. The rest, I guess, we'll wait on for next week. But again, everybody, thank you. Thank you for making it through with us.
So thank you, everyone. We're wrapping up, so feel free to end if you would like, but if you want to stay on longer, ask questions, process, talk, or anything, we'll be here for about 20 more minutes.
And thank you all for joining us today and for all your lovely feedback and suggestions. We really do appreciate it, and we can't wait to see what you all your comments in the doc. So thank you again.
And we'll get all the materials to everyone at some point, as soon as we can.
So if we have a question now, do we just ask it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So something that came up in one of the breakout rooms earlier when we were role playing, I guess like stating what our boundaries are.